Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome once again to Property Live. Property Matters Live, I should say. And we have, as usual, our esteemed Lord Master Hamish McClay of Surgic and Ray, and today's special guest, friend of the show, Zara Olibokas. And today's topic is one I think will intrigue most people: making sense of service charges. Can we indeed make sense of service charges? And to start us off, Hamish McClay.
Whether we can make sense of them or not is one matter. Transparency would help, of course. Now, the Metropolitan Thames Valley Housing have demonstrated a way of enabling people to see exactly what is going on with service charges. It's a big challenge because many people will often forget it. And of course, Zara knows this better than anybody else because she's trying to help people get themselves into a position where they know exactly what they're doing and know exactly what the risks are. And all too often, some aspects of it can be a little bit difficult to see right the way through. I mean, the cost once you move into play, one assumes we've got this cost to get into somewhere, but the realization a little bit further on down the road that we've got some costs increasing, which tend to, very often to be management fees, service fees. It's going to be a big thing. But then it's experiment carried out. Now, again, we've got so much, people speak about, well, we've got to use IT, we've got to use software, we've got to use Chat GPT. Now, this is a sensible application of it, which does actually enable people to see something that they want to see without having to sort of chase too hard for it. And let's hope that it does enable many people, because it is a difficult one. And unfortunately, some of the people that are charging these management fees have a habit of making them much higher than people would expect. But of course, Zara can tell us much more about the challenges that people face once they get into the various places that they think, I've got the place I want.
Well, Zara, welcome to the show. What say you?
Yeah, it is a bit of a pickle. It's a minefield because whatever you get back as part of the inquiries process, everybody presents the information differently. So, I'm not a forensic accountant. I get given accounts. But also, people get given a budget or an estimate of what's likely to be spent. And then they might find themselves on the receiving end of further bills at the end of the service charge years because the management company have gone, oops, we've had to forget, we didn't include this in the budget, or this was an emergency repair, and then we didn't use money in the reserve fund. So it's broken up into different parts, and it's difficult for the lawyers. Imagine how difficult it is for Joe Public to read what they're given and work out what they're being charged for. And it's, talking about the affordable housing arena, you don't quite get that breakdown in the budget. You just get sent a letter every year saying, right, this is your increase, but it doesn't tell you exactly what you're paying for. Not always. Some of them do, some of them don't. I saw a case literally yesterday where a local authority are charging leaseholders £100,000 each for replacement windows. That just beggars belief.
How do they manage to get away with such nonsense?
That, double glazing costs that much, and the information was, well, you've got the right to say something. How many people have got the time and energy to say something? But, those people should argue and try and get the council to justify such a high cost. And, I'm quite sure that if you were to replace double glazing on a house, it would not be in the region of £100,000.
It sounds crazy. Hamish, how can a currently divided market support such nefarious activity?
Well, I think we're always going to see that. I mean, I'm challenged myself. I I don't have to go through the same steps that Zara has to go through when she's trying to validate things, when she's trying to take out the list for her clients that she's actually looking to get into their place of choice. But I do struggle sometimes with the council, because all of a sudden we've got an interesting one at the moment. Braintree Council decided that they're going to impose a particular charge, and that charge which they've imposed, compared to what Zara was just speaking about, is really nothing in reality. But all of a sudden they've decided, well, you will pay us £30 for the building regs, because that's what we've decided it is, and it's based on the fact that we're charging our charge out rate £70 an hour. And you think, who are you charging out at £70 an hour? Because you're certainly not paying your staff that. But the last time we actually had sent them, I mean, we've done an awful lot of work with Braintree over time, but the previously wasn't a charge, and all of a sudden it's imposed. So what percentage increase is that from 0 to, having to pay them sort of £30? And so there's then because what I have to try and do then, like Zara does, I try and say to them, how can you break this down, and how can you justify the £70? And they still haven't justified the £70. But they're not the only council that does that to get the justification for it. So it really must be absolute hell to sort of really get to the bottom of it, and to be able to say with any great degree of accuracy and be able to guarantee 100%, this is what you're going to be paying, or this is what you're... I mean, there's a load of adverts on television at the moment trying to get people to sort of buy into their new internet, whether it happens to be Sky or whether it happens to be whoever happens, and they're saying fantastic price, it's going to cost you £17. However, we're going to increase it by £26 in January, and you don't actually sort of necessarily see that. If you think, wow, that's £17, that's good. But you don't know how long it's going to be for. So it must be really hellish. So I do hope, I haven't actually looked into that idea that the Metropolitan Thames Valley housing people came up with, but it does appear clear that it's actually cut down on the number of people that have to actually sort of approach them and say, what is this going to be? What's that going to be? But it doesn't help the situation up front, because that in itself must be a very, very difficult one to actually help clients out with.
Well, it seems crazy, this scenario. Zara, it means that a lot of people are effectively hamstrung by the fact that people just aren't supporting them properly.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, it's one thing that you're presented during the conveyancing process with service charges, and you look at the figures and think, yeah, that looks okay. But the warning needs to go out is that these figures aren't static, and they will change, within a year, sometimes within 6 months, depending on when the service charge year ends. But then you've also got not just service charges on leasehold properties, which they have to go through consultation processes, but you've got service charges on freehold properties, which are in relation to estate management companies. Now, those service charges on freeholds, they don't follow the same law as leaseholds. So those service charges can go up, and they don't have an obligation to consult you as to what you're paying. So these charges can be astronomical. But also, if you're being charged for insurance and things like that, you don't know if the company setting up the insurance is making a commission on it. I was looking at one yesterday. The buildings insurance for a house was £613 for a year on a shared ownership property. And I'm sitting there, this is a new build house, and I'm sitting there thinking, surely you'd be able to get or source cheaper buildings insurance if you're an individual, but because it's covered under a bulk commercial policy, it's different, and you potentially might end up paying a higher amount than if you own the property outright.
So but that seems a crazy setup. The fact that and I think guaranteed to create insecurity, and people are often least able to cope with such insecurity. I mean, it doesn't feel like this is entirely legal.
Well, it's legal because of the way that it's written into the legal documents. But I think what people need to be aware of is how to scrutinise the information they're given and then how to challenge it. But obviously, challenging it without going down the legal route is pretty expensive. And you're putting yourself at risk for paying lots of legal costs, not only your own, but obviously the person that you're complaining about, because they will try and flip it on you and say that's your problem. As I've seen from lots of things floating around, that, you know, housing associations don't want to take accountability for what they're charging. You know, people aren't aware of these complex legal structures on their property. Yeah, MTVH are trying to do the right thing. I haven't seen what they've put out to try and decipher it, but I've had people that have bought from them, and I've said to them, do you know, have you got a head lease? Does somebody else own the building? And they don't often have a clue that, you know, these charges are simply being passed on, and then extra charges added on. So you could have a building with shared owners and normal leaseholders, but the shared owners end up paying more, maybe slightly, maybe a lot more, because the housing association are adding on management fees, but also even on a freehold estate service charge. I've got this lovely client who's paying paying on time every month, but the money's not being passed on to the people that run the estate. So I'm asking for the information on a staircasing, and they've incurred lots of late fees. Guess who's going to be charged for that? It's not his fault that the payments were made late. He's paid on time, but the housing association haven't passed the money on. And so he's incurred £42 worth of late fees.
So hang on a moment, that doesn't sound right. Why the housing association should be duty bound to pass the money on, surely?
Well, they should be. Whether or not they're doing it in a timely manner is a different question. And the legal paperwork is always kind of wishy-washy, and you know, the balance of power is always in the hands of the landlord or the housing association, so that even if they, you know, don't do something right, it's always the leaseholder who ends up paying for it.
But hang on a moment, Hamish, this doesn't appear to be an equitable way of working, where you're the very people, the very organisation that is supposed to be providing you the backbone and the support for you to live in that area is in fact helping you incur late fees because they're not passing on the monies quickly enough.
Well, there's nothing new in that either. This is one of the sad aspects about it. And Zara's quite right. The challenge is, it's always those that have the loudest voice, and the ones that have the loudest voice. Well, I mean, we're all sorts of matters. This government, in fairness to them, they're trying to improve so many things. In fact, in many respects, I think the government's got too many things it's trying to actually improve. If we could actually sort of start at one and get it right, then move on to another one and see if we can actually sort of get that right. Because it's within our sort of housing sector, within the property sector generally, there are a tremendous number of irregularities. And it's only when you start looking into them, because Zara's mentioned a couple already, when you actually look into the situation, because of the cladding issues, and depending on the heights of buildings, there's so many other costs that can be sort of built in that you don't know about because you haven't had sight of those. And as Zara knows, she will dig and dig and dig because Zara's like that. Yet there are still charges that are hidden from view. And at the end of the day, the person who speaks loudest, the person that has the money, is the one that comes out and said, no, that's tough luck. It was always there. That information was always available. You didn't ask the right people, or whatever it happens to be. You're going to have to fight to get your money back, and it's going to cost you, and there's no guarantee that you're going to get it. So there's nothing new in that respect. What we do have is transparency in so many areas of what's going on. And the worst of it we've found, we knew there were situations going on in flat. We knew there were management fees there. But the sad thing is, and Zara intimated there, you've got estates now where they have management fees because they've retained ownership. And we've got a fine example around here in Bicester where we are. We have ex-army quarters, we have ex-RAF quarters, and developers have bought those to actually, because all the houses need sorting out and sort of all the rest of it, but they've retained ownership of the roads, so they can charge management fees.
Yeah, and that's on top of council tax, Hamish.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And, you know, people sort of see the figures when they're buying. They've got stars in their eyes and they think, okay, this is affordable, but they don't plan for when it could change at the drop of a hat.
Right.
If something needs doing. So, you know, you've got people that have signed up into the shared ownership programme.
Right.
They might have been presented with a low bill of, you know, maybe £1,500 to £1,800 a year for a flat. As I've probably said on a previous podcast, I had a young lady who'd bought a flat in July.
Yeah.
And then in September, she received a Section 20 notice for fire safety works in the building. This is a brand new building, you know.
You'd have thought it comes with already that within the price.
Exactly. And I've been told by people under anonymous names because they don't want to share or reveal their identities for fear of repercussions, that, you know, they're being asked by developers to purposely, you know, put together figures that are lower than what it costs to maintain it. So what you find is that you get one thing from the developers, and then when it's actually handed over to the people that are going to manage it, they're going to have to change the figures straight away.
It seems like a crazy circumstance. Is there anything that is going to be done in the short term to alleviate this? Or are we stuck with this for the moment going forward, do you think, Hamish?
I think the sad thing is there's nothing going to be done in the short term. It's a little bit like sort of saying, for example, I think it was over 12 months ago now, there was a tremendous procedure that I espied relative to the building of any properties, to be perfectly honest, where building control could be managed so effectively by introducing a very simplistic process, which was using software. You didn't need to use using a little bit of AI, but it was just the software process which was so good at capturing it, because everything was actually contained, all the information was contained there together, and it was very simple, very straightforward. Now, that is only part of the sector which has been using it. You don't have to use it. And I think this is a problem that Zara's intimating. There's inconsistency because there isn't sufficient transparency on the different types of information, because there isn't an element of control. And we know, again, regulation doesn't mean that it gets hit right. Regulation needs to be regulated. It needs to be put under some element of so that side of it, even you can't actually sort of guarantee.
Wow. Zara, this is a situation that seems to have been in place for quite a while, and Hamish is intimating that there's no real appetite to change it. This seems to be an awful state of affairs.
Yeah, it's it's the people who are in charge. They have a lot of control, and it's their way or the highway. You know, the Law Society have got standard forms of questions. So you've got the FME one for freehold estate inquiries and the LP one for leasehold inquiries. But, you know, some companies refuse to answer those forms, and they will say, well, this is our information, here's the way we present it, and they charge an arm and a leg for it. So, you know, you've got all this different variations in the way the information is presented, and it's not always easily digestible. And you have to really sit and think what's missing, what's not been answered. And also, I've been told on some training courses that, that information is actually only valid on the day that it's issued, because it can change within the next week or two if something happens to the building or if something needs fixing.
Good Lord. Hamish, would you care to take us home?
Right. So what we need is consistency and transparency, and we don't appear to have either of those. I think, like anything else, it's a general awareness thing. And it's really advice to people out there when you are looking to buy that property. Do try and look about it. I mean, it's not a bad idea. In fact, it's absolutely a good idea. If you've never had the experience previously, to really work, try and find somebody like Wendy Gibson, who runs a first-time buyers club, somebody of that particular nature who will give you the guidance initially and then work very, very closely with the solicitor. And it's the team that make the difference. But even then, as we know, there is a challenge because it can actually sort of change. But it is a cost to be very much aware of, because it can be quite significant. As Zara just indicated there, you can end up paying for things you just weren't expecting. Oh, we need some double glazing. Oh, it's time to do the cladding again. Or it's time to do something else. Or we've just decided that because the basement keeps flooding, that we're going to have to put a charge on all the sort of flat owners to repair that. And at the moment, it's a bit of a difficult one. So it's certainly something which needs to be investigated, to give the transparency, and then to actually make sure that it's fixed, that there's consistency about it. The government are trying to change things, and it looks as though there's some positives. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of negatives we've got in there. But
wow. What a tangled web we weave. Seems it's been in place for some time. And hopefully some last glimmers there from Hamish that maybe at some point they'll actually put their whatever to the sticking stone and actually get things done and improve the way in which service charges are both made available and understood up front. It seems like a lot of people don't realize that there's hidden charges within any of these property transactions because of the service charges for the leases that they own. But how interesting. But thank you so much, Zara, as ever, giving us the force for good in from the legal perspective. And of course, Hamish McClay, who helps us try and make sense of all this. Remember, this show is all about trying to get you to realize that there's more to be explored than perhaps it meets the eye, and to keep yourself as surrounded with people who actually understand these things, because information is power. Thank you once again, Hamish McClay of Search Convey. Thank you, Zariola Bokas of Next to Law. And to you out there, please keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and look after that mental health. Until next week, bye-bye.